Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, James Protin. Every week I will be sharing the experiences that have defined my journey and talking with people who have their own powerful story to tell. It's about doing better and being better in life, business, and all things in between. The visually inclined can catch us on YouTube, or you can check us out on just about every podcast platform. At Chrome Federal Credit Union, delivering more than the member expects is what we do. We believe in being there for the biggest and smallest moments. With Chrome, you aren't just a customer, you are a member. Join us today and experience the difference. Chrome, banking that shines. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. We are back here at Cohatch at the waterfront, and our guest today is Mike Matesic, CEO of Idea Foundry. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to Cohatch for making this happen.
Yeah, this is a great space. You have a great space here.
I'm very happy here. We were in Oakland for 21 years, so we were a little concerned when we moved in if we were going to like it, and within a couple weeks, we were very happy here and have been here now for a little more than a year, and really can utilize the space very well in our work. So,
no, that's great. That is fantastic. And, you know, Lynette is just a master connector, you know, and she said that, I want you to meet Mike. Mike's a guy you need to have on the podcast. And I said, okay, if you say so.
Well, she said so, then yes, absolutely. So
where are you? Are you a Pittsburgh guy by native?
I am born and bred and have been here my entire life. And happy to say that. A fun fact that I tell a lot of people that are shocked. I've only lived in two houses my whole life.
Is that right?
The house I grew up in and the house I've had for 35 years. No dorm, no apartment, just house and house.
House and house.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, yes, I bleed rusty Pittsburgh.
You and me both. I think it's the greatest place in the country to live. I mean, I really do. So tell me about Idea Foundry. Let's start there and kind of let me work backwards as to how you got to this point. So give us a little background. It's really impressive, and I don't even want to attempt to try get into it. I'd rather you do that because it's really cool.
Sure, and it was timing. You know, timing is everything. Mm-hmm. And during the dot-com era, Pittsburgh did not participate like other places around the country with capital and internet-based companies growing up and creating jobs. And so right after the bubble popped was the creation of Idea Foundry. Okay. And it was based upon if there was ever going to be another bubble, we better participate in it. Mm-hmm. And the focus was on commercializing research from our universities. Okay. So we were in Oakland for 21 years. To commercialize technology coming out of the University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon University. Okay. And it was at a time when I literally had to explain the word entrepreneur. Right. And that you have to, it's so difficult to present what it was like at that period of time in Pittsburgh. We were a big company town. You know, you went and worked for Mellon Bank for 35 years.
That's exactly right.
You did the entrepreneurial spirit just wasn't that vibrant. Right. So our early days, we spent with faculty and researchers talking about the value of commercializing, the value of building a business. Okay. And that was to keep the research innovation here so we could create jobs. Okay. And those jobs were all different types of jobs that every business needs. And the more businesses, the more ancillary businesses would be created. Right. So it was a trickle-down concept that if we created more tech companies, we would create more jobs, period. Right. And that went exactly as planned up until the Great Recession, when everything changed for a little while. Sure. It was a very dramatic period of time in our portfolio's existence. We lost a number of companies during that period of time, but it also created the playing field for a dramatic rise in entrepreneurship that occurred a few years after the Great Recession. Okay. So in the early days, we had to push it, and then all of a sudden, it was a wave that was just building and still builds to this day. Right. As we go forward. So early days, we had to push it out the door and get people to start businesses, and then not long in probably 2012 to 14, we began closing doors, saying, we can't support this one, we can't support that one. And that was less fun, of course.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
But we were still creating more and more new companies. And we had to be more selective about the types of companies we supported. Throughout that period of time, we kept noticing something very striking with about 3 streets away or 3 blocks away in Oakland, everything changed. So you had this vibrant, small part of Oakland. But as soon as you got towards the hill, everything changed. And we kept saying there has to be a way to flatten this out to where everybody benefits in the new economy, in the innovation-based space. And so we began to develop more programming to support diversity in entrepreneurship around the region. First question was always female entrepreneurship and creating women entrepreneurship programs. In truth, the entrepreneurial portfolio we had, over 60% had women founders. So it really wasn't a gap. So we didn't create a women-only program, but what we did create was an equitable entrepreneurship program, which was targeted towards minorities and immigrants.
Okay.
I'm an immigrant, just a few generations removed.
Likewise.
We all are.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, we believe that if you were here in Pittsburgh and you had the opportunity to create a business, the drive, the skills, and all of the requirements necessary to commit to entrepreneurship, we wanted to make sure there was a program available for you. Google's awarded us an honor for that, and we funded that with our own funds. It's something that most people are surprised to hear. We didn't leverage government resources for that. We didn't leverage philanthropic resources. We leveraged the returns we made off the companies we'd already invested in. So the innovation economy paid for the ability for small businesses to get funding from us as well. And that went on for more than 3 years. Wow. And it was an amazing period of time to see how entrepreneurship wasn't just a top of a pyramid, but was beginning to flatten out and affecting a wide variety of people. So it was very rewarding for me to be part of that. At the same time, we were also building programming to help other places around the world. Okay. So that's something we can talk more about as we go forward. But that's a little bit of the background of Idea Foundry.
Interesting. So how do you see that wave? Do you think that wave has crested, or is it still going forward? What do you think the future?
So I would split it into two and answer that with my opinion as it is. It may be an experienced opinion, but it's still an opinion. Sure. That there is a separation of much needed entrepreneurship in small business. The country was built on small business.
Absolutely.
Anytime we saw aggregation to monopoly status, we all suffered.
Well, just think about when we were kids. We didn't go online. We didn't go to big box stores. We went to Main Street. Right. We went to a little mom and pop shop. We got shoes. We got this. We got that. Everything came from the town you lived in. Right. And maybe you could say that those folks were the first entrepreneur. That word wasn't invented then, but it wasn't thought of. But
they were the shopkeepers, the business owners.
Yeah, but that's. I agree. That's how our country was built, on their shoulders.
And I see that wave isn't anywhere near crested. Although many people could be listening to this challenging, but the economies of scales don't work at the small business level. And all of those factors are true, but I tend to believe that innovation and entrepreneurship go hand in hand and can be applied at the smallest level. Shopify enables almost any business to have an online presence and be able to sell products. So you may not just have a physical shop that all of your sales take place within the 4 walls of your business. You can have an online presence and be able to commercialize your product line that way. So it's not just recreating the old. It's about using the new to do old things.
Right.
That
is a
benefit
great
from.
way to put that. That is very, very well said, because that's a tried and true formula. Obviously the world has changed dramatically since then, without revealing how old we actually are. But at the end of the day, that worked, and it worked for a specific reason. The reasons that you're talking about now with tech, it was the same concepts back then.
Yeah, and you ask yourself now, and it's, the data proves this out, that if given the choice between purchasing something that was made locally versus something that was shipped here from far away, consumers choose
Right.
the local.
Right.
And from that perspective, that's why I think that wave is still coming.
Okay.
Still coming. On the other side, the high growth, high innovation, high technology entrepreneurship wave, I think, has crested already.
Okay.
Notwithstanding an AI bubble that's going on right now, I would say in general, most people believe the United States leadership in tech is so supreme that no one can touch it.
Really?
What we witness is everywhere around the world. Some of that is through our own educational system here. We have trained the future technologists and innovators such that I see innovation occurring everywhere across the planet, which is good for all of us,
Right.
in a collective way.
Yes.
But from an economic entrepreneurial wave, I see less pure innovation-based businesses in Pittsburgh starting.
Really?
With an exception, and that is international students and immigrants are more likely to start a business than Pittsburghers or Americans in general speaking. So I think that wave is actually crested already.
Okay.
But we as consumers, consuming these technologies and innovations, we're still seeing new every day.
Sure.
And it'll take a while before we recognize that new isn't necessarily being born here, as it might be born somewhere else.
That's very true. Yeah, I can't agree with that. And I don't know if that's good or bad for us.
Well,
You know what I mean? I don't know what do you think that how does that bode well, for example, for us as a country moving forward?
well, I think it's a complicated question. And from the standpoint, I want to make a parallel to energy for just a second.
Sure.
We're here in Pittsburgh. Obviously, we've seen the effects of fracking and the natural gas that we've been able to generate. And the energy independence of the United States came from innovation that enabled us to extract more fossil fuel. I realize it's fossil. However, that energy independence made dramatic effects on the globe.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So if it wasn't for the innovation, we may not have seen the U.S. positioning as it is.
Right.
Conversely, if innovations are occurring elsewhere, what might that do to those locations in terms of their growth and competitiveness?
Right.
If you believe the world will remain at peace, the rising tide will float all boats.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that on one side,
that's
you
a
could
big
see
if,
that.
though.
I know. That's why
in the world we live in, that's a huge if.
And that so I have, from my own perspective, a sense of optimism that innovation both keeps us safe and makes it riskier. So
I understand.
The riskier sides are, haves and have-nots. They have something we don't have. We'll go to war over it. It was land, it was natural resources, but now it might be more technology and innovation, or control over technology and innovation.
Right.
So that risk is absolutely real, and we as humans could really screw that up. We all know that, and
Like
we all
everything
know.
else. As soon as we put our hands in it, yeah.
And we grew up at a time when we were trained what would happen in the event of a nuclear apocalypse.
Right.
What to do.
Right.
Hiding under our desks.
Get under the desk.
Save us, yes. But so with that came this Cold War and a sense of, well, you push, I push, we're all done. So we don't push.
Right.
Will that continue into the future?
Yep.
when fingerprints may not be as easily found on whose finger's on the button, we're living in a cybersecurity risky environment. Every day or every week there's something in the news about some level of cybersecurity threat somewhere to some of our basic systems that we take for granted. So there is the more technically integrated and technically complex environment, the more we're dependent upon it and the more risk we have associated with it. And at the same time, the world is catching up faster and faster on technology.
Yeah.
I don't think this is just a race to where we have to stay ahead of everybody. I think there are pockets of technology where we must stay ahead of everyone for security purposes. But beyond that, I think a rising tide does float all boats.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a big believer in that. And I think that, referencing the infrastructure that we have here, both tech, both physical. When you look at our water, wastewater, stormwater, the natural gas, coal, anything that we produce, it's a natural resource of ours. I think we're obligated to develop that to its fullest extent for the reasons you just list. I mean, and by the way, natural gas is a clean and safe form of energy. That's a conversation for another day, but I just want to put that out there.
You're talking to a coal guy.
No,
I was in the coal industry for a decade, so I'm not going to argue with you about the importance of fossil energy, but it always needs wrapped up around the environmental policies
100%,
to make it as safe as possible.
100%, because we only have one planet, right. And that's very true, and it is struggling right now. From that's the environmental impact standpoint of humans. Okay, this planet is struggling. But there's ways we can have the best of both worlds. For example, we can develop fossil fuels and those types of resources and still protect the environment. It can be done. And probably, I've been in the engineering industry for over 40 years, and I think the most environmentally conscious corporations, big companies that I've ever encountered are the ones operating within that space, that natural gas space. But once we get political about it, once we bring that into play, and again, it's a major issue. We're in another presidential election cycle, and it's become an issue again. And it's been an issue with the Ukrainian-Russian war. The flow of natural gas. Russia keeps threatening to cut it off. This is going to happen. That's going to happen. So I think that our dependence on the resources that we are going to need to survive are going to be severely impacted by how the technology space progresses. Right?
And I go back to that simple inspiration or desperation as a motivator in terms of things, and the somewhat complacent environment that we are in will lead to a desperation to ensure we protect our natural resources and have access to the natural resources that we need. The inspiration you can see in other countries across the globe that are taking sort of advanced action to control those natural resources. I never knew really what it meant to be an American until I was in China and had been to China.
That's interesting.
I really, and I argue this point quite frequently, that one of the benefits of being an American is you don't really know what it means to be an American.
True.
Because you take so much for granted, and that is part of being American.
Right.
So when you get to another place that has a completely different thought process from the time they're born, you can really see that comparison or that contrast of that, and it became abundantly clear to me on a few trips in China, and what I see in that, it leads us to be, since we take things for granted as uniquely part of being American,
right?
We're likely to get surprised. Oops! Wait, why didn't we do that? Why didn't we plan for that up front? Why didn't we see that beforehand? And that tension, I think, will ultimately keep the innovation engines roaring, whether it is inspirational innovation or desperation innovation. But I do believe that innovation will continue to roar within the U.S. from that perspective.
It has to. We have no choice. So you mentioned that you were in the coal business, and southwestern Pennsylvania, coal has been king for a long time, and whatever the state of it is right now, however you stand on that, coal built this country. So how did you get from coal to Idea Foundry?
So it was an interesting journey.
I was going to say that's a journey.
It was, and it was driven out of finance, and I'll explain that in a second. So, but I want to go back to the environmental side in coal, because our mines were some in Pennsylvania, some in Maryland, but mostly West Virginia. We were headquartered in Morgantown, West Virginia, and most of our coal miners were conservationists, were environmentalists, were farmers. They cared every bit about that land,
right?
Even though they may have been considered doing something environmentally damaging. I tell people that all the time because they would very surprised to hear that.
Oh, I know.
You're not, but so many people are, and so I want to mention that. And we were a very aggressively growing coal mining company. Our visionary leader just saw so much opportunity in the industry. Was quite progressive in his approach to reclaiming the land and improving the land for future use. Sure. And as part of that, we grew very rapidly. It was that rapid growth which led us to go and do a public offering of our securities. Okay. And as the chief financial officer leading that effort, I was worked in Wall Street and with investment banking firms. And it was that experience shortly thereafter that led me to move into the tech space.
Okay.
And it was to join a company also working in a traditional industry called MetalSite, which was trading metals online. It was one of the first, the Wall Street Journal noted it as one of the first business-to-business e-commerce sites. Okay. And that was a vision of who is still my chair of the board here at Idea Foundry, of saying, why do we all have to learn different websites? Why can't we create one website that customers can go and buy steel from all of us? It was a true marketplace, way ahead of its time.
That's way too logical.
And it was.
Way too logical.
The beauty of its logic was also its curse, because there were many people that were afraid the internet was going to take their job at that time. Yeah. But so I moved from one public offering in the coal industry to another public offering in the steel industry, which occurred during the dot-com era. And we did not quite make it in terms of going public. We were valued. Now the word billion is very common. You hear billions all the time. But back in 2001, billion was a really big word.
Billion was a big number.
And we were valued by Wall Street at $2 billion. And we had total historical revenue of $1.5 million. Just think of how warped those valuations were. Wow. And so living through that experience, being part of that incredible period of time that wasn't based on solid financial footing,
right,
as a result of the pop and the loss of all those companies, I went from a coal mining company of $300 million in revenue, only worth $125 million in value, to a company with $1.5 million of revenue worth $2 billion.
Yeah, so that doesn't
incredible.
Just doesn't.
It didn't.
It doesn't
It
balance.
didn't for me. I'm like, how do these?
How
work?
does this? Yeah.
But it was an incredible experience, and that experience, doing road shows and going to Wall Street to raise money publicly, was something that is still beneficial in my work at Idea Foundry, because I can work with an entrepreneur who is so sure their company is going to go public someday, and say, do you know what it takes to go public? What work it requires? What financial results you need to have to go public? So maybe let's not just shoot for public. Let's shoot for sustainability, solid growth. With solid growth, you have freedom to choose how you go, whether that's public or private. If you only shoot for public, you might find that you don't build the right kind of company for the long haul.
Right. And, you know, we're going to get ready to wrap up here, but just that I wanted to make something just really struck me during our conversation. You're talking about Idea Foundry, okay? You're working all over the world. You're doing all of these things, and yet you're sitting here in a co-working space. What you described, if people didn't know, they would think you were in a big corporate, you know, suite someplace, you know, and it just speaks to the efficiency and how the tech space has come and moved forward to allow us to do that. You know, to a lesser extent, I do it in my business. You know, all I literally need is a laptop and Wi-Fi, and I can work from anywhere in the world and do my job efficiently. You know, and that's a wonderful thing.
It is, and we're still processing all that. I still consider us a toddler with technology. Okay. We're still fumbling with it to try to find that right balance. Most in government and economic development want there to be tremendous amounts of jobs created. That is exactly
that's the metric.
the
That's how we
opposite.
measure. Yeah.
But that's exactly the opposite of what you need in a technology company. So you have this tension there between success, financial success, and employment success. Right. And we still have yet to solve, where do all the jobs come from? If tech can't give us the jobs, and inherently it takes less workers to create more output.
Yep.
Where do we go? And I find, you know, as I'm aging into to my twilight working years, I hope to look back 20 more years from now and say, we found the answer. And that might be work and jobs are different than what we've thought about throughout our lives.
Right. And I think that's the sticking point, you know, because when you get people that are of a certain age, we remember, well, you know, what's a job? A job today is completely different than it was 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. That's constantly evolving. You know, what the definition of a job actually is.
Yes, and I think that once we have shattered the old definitions and replaced them with a new definition, whatever that might be, that will help us all see where the opportunities lie for the future.
Wow. Well, listen, Mike, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. It's been, I mean, we could sit here and talk for an hour.
we could.
Definitely, the next time we're here, I'll reach out. We'll pick up from where we left off.
Sounds good.
But thank you, my friend.
Thank you.